we wanted to,
It just booted me out. It just booted us out.
oh, can I still talk?
I'm not sure.
All right, we're back in.
Oh.
I don't know what happened. We just got kicked out of Zoom.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so we're going to check the status of that sustainable community designation, and we want to make sure it runs parallel with the comprehensive plan as well. So there might be simply a meeting briefing you on where things stand with the sustainable communities application. And next is rules of procedure for the Planning Commission and the Board of Appeals. Leslie will be talking tonight about the Planning Commission's rules of procedure. This is more about just bringing you up to speed that we have that and refreshing everyone's memory. And if there's any desire for the Planning Commission to change it or tweak them, we can do that this year. That's kind of something that should stay on the agenda every year,
Yeah.
just to focus on.
Yeah.
Now we're getting into the interesting things. Evaluate the zoning ordinance to consider and recommend priority improvements, including improvements to the section on site plan review and approval, and add a section on site plan amendments. So we have language already that we've prepared that would say what an amendment is, whether it's material amendment or non-material amendment. If it's material, if the zoning administrator judges it to be material or really substantive, would change the outcome of the plan, then that's got to go back to the Planning Commission and get reviewed just like any site plan would. But if it's a non-material change, a technical change, we're going to have procedures for doing that in-house. And that will streamline these amendments without a doubt.
Good.
But that's just one. We're also looking at other ways of improving the streamlining of the ordinance, and addressing the content requirements of the site plans. And is anything else that you could? Yeah, there's some other things too, but what we'll do is come to you with a kind of a table of contents of various improvements or improvements to the text of the document, and then we'll chip at them over the course of the year.
Sounds good.
Yeah. And the last item is the comprehensive plan update. The comprehensive plan, as you know, is the most important document that a planning commission prepares. It's the 20-year development plan, and it's adopted or updated every 10 years to keep it current. The last plan was adopted by the town in 2015, excuse me, which started in 2013. And so we want to get a jump on this year's update, this decade's update. And I put together an outline with Najila, and I want to just run it through with you. This overall schedule shows where we are tonight with or next month in April.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes all the way through October of 2024. The first couple months on this schedule, April and May, we want to begin talking with you about the current plan, just so that we all have an understanding of what the plan says and what the town did to implement it over the course of the last 10 years, and where the town has fallen short and why. So we can really understand what the town's policy is and how we're going about implementing the plan. Again, we'll have a shared understanding of that. In the meantime, beginning in May, actually it might even be sooner than that, if you go down to public engagement, we've talked about creating a dashboard on the town's website, kind of a landing page for the comprehensive plan. So everything comprehensive plan related would be there. Anybody can go to that site to see any draft that might be written or reviewed by the Planning Commission, see these maps that we're working on, get a sense of the overall schedule and some instructions on how they can leave comments and participate in the process. That may take candidly more than the end of May to do, but we're going to start at that.
Okay.
We also want to create an email list, like an email blast. And while I'm down there on public engagement, I'm just going to stay there for a minute. And we're thinking about producing some videos to inform the public, invite participation, just like YouTube videos, just to say what the comprehensive plan is and invite people to participate. And then as we get into details, we can describe what a land use plan is, what the zoning is, and why it's important that you show up to talk about the various zoning categories with the planning commission. We might talk about environmental resources and forests and streams and buffers, and whatever the planning commission wants to sort of guide us to do. I've put like one every 3 months. And I actually found this candidly to be really beneficial. People love this. And it gets so many hits. You wouldn't expect it to be of like that great of an interest to people, but people really like it. And it's a way of accessing information in a very easy way. You don't have to come to the meeting to hear about it. And it's only 5 minutes, and people get a lot of enjoyment out of that. Okay, so let's go back up to the top. The reviewing the current plan. Population demographics of Emmitsburg. Hopefully by June, we're going to have all the census information available. Census has been delayed this year. Every 6 months, a promise is made to deliver it, and it just hasn't happened. The census simply hasn't delivered the data, particularly at the local level. The only thing that we have right now from the 2020 count are the number of housing units and the number of people at the municipal level. We don't have anything else. Now the census has shifted to a more statistical model for coming up with information, but the count is the most reliable data available, especially at a small sample size like a town. We could use, and we probably will have to supplement the 2020 data with what's called the American Community Survey, this statistical approach. But the margins of error sometimes are so great as to almost be laughable. And it's hard to say with a straight face that the set of data accurately describes a community when the margins of error are 80%. And yeah, so I have to caution everybody not to use that data, or only use this data if it supplements and supports some other analysis. So anyway, ideally, we wait for the census to deliver the 2020 data. Municipal growth is the third chapter that we're thinking, and that is really about where the town is in terms of its growth, what projections can describe the future, what the impacts of projected growth are on water, sewer, schools, libraries, public facilities, and where the growth boundaries of the town are likely to be or should be when we look out for 20 years. We look out to 2040, 2042, 2045, what should be the ultimate boundaries of Emmitsburg. And then chapters 4 and 5 are pretty self-explanatory. 5 is a chapter that was required recently by state law, requires us to look at the quality of the water going into the bay through the various streams and rivers, but also the quality of drinking water that the town uses. Then land use, community design, and housing. The housing is a brand new chapter that will have to show up in the Emmitsburg plan, and towns are required in Maryland to have a plan to address low-income housing and affordable workforce housing. So that's a new requirement, and it'll be an entirely new set of data and recommendations for the town's plan. Chapters 8 and 9 take us all the way out to this time next year. That's transportation and community facilities. And then finally, at chapter 10, implementation, we're thinking June of 2024. This could be condensed, there's no doubt about it, but Planning Commission is doing other work, and we're not compelled to deliver this plan right away. It's 2025 is the actual date that has to be adopted by. So we're kind of got a nice window to begin working on. And the mayor says he wants it to get started. And
Yep.
So we're gearing up.
Great.
Yeah.
I especially like that you have outlined a number of ways to engage the public. I think that's really crucial
Yeah.
to do that.
Agreed.
Because at the end of the day, when you put out this plan, there's going to be people that say, oh, I never heard about this, but it always pays to try to reach as many people as possible. I think that's really important, and thank you for doing that.
Right.
Any other commissioners have comments or questions for Chris?
Yeah, I want to second it. The dynamic approach you take to keeping the public involved in this warns me, because last time it was a nightmare.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the public, we had various meetings with the business community, with the faith-based community. And then the end, people go, well, I didn't know there were meetings with all these groups. And there were some people in every single meeting for every group, say, across the line. So I like that. And before you were here, we've gone into issues where things have changed and we've had to adjust the plan. And I just want to make sure we get it right, where growth and where we want things, where we want business, where we want residential, where we want mixed use. So I love this schedule.
Good, good.
It's very good.
And I like the schedule in and of itself. I like the visual, being able to look at this. Obviously, it's a work in progress and things will change, but just it's easier to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Sure. Well, in the binders that we give you, we'll have this in there. And I'm almost certain that by the time we're finished, we'll have 3 or 4 versions of it. But at least we have a plan and
Yeah.
we'll be making adjustments to it, but we'll be zeroing in on it. And maybe some of these we get done even faster than shown here, and that would be ideal.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Chris.
You bet. Okay.
So we'll move on to our next item. Presentation by town council and discussion regarding review processes for applications presented to the planning commission. Okay.
So, hi, everybody. It's nice to see you all again, and thank you very much for taking your time to work for the betterment of Emmitsburg. That is a huge, huge benefit that you are bestowing on the town.
Thank you.
And I don't know that you get thanked often enough, but you should.
Thank you. Just for the sake of the audience, could you state your name?
Absolutely. My name is Leslie Powell. I'm counsel to the town of Emmitsburg. And what I have here is I've got a little package. And for some of you, this is old news. And for some of you, it may be new news. I'm also including the financial disclosure form with this little outline. So.
Not to hand it out.
Throw it at you.
Yeah. Make little airplanes. Thank you. So I've already handed
Yeah,
in my
we've already
Oh, you
disclosure.
had.
Yeah.
Does everybody have one?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is some.
The disclosure is probably already done, yeah, so.
Okay. So, I'd like to tee off something that Chris said when he was talking about the development of the comprehensive plan and the role that the planning commission has in matters that relate to land use. And you're charged with representing or acting on behalf of the public interest. And I just can't emphasize this enough. And so you are, in that sense, removed from the fray. All right. It's not your job to lobby for an applicant. It's not your job to, espouse a particular project. What you have to do, or what I urge you to do, is to consider the benefits that are available to the town. And you essentially have 2 types of functions. You have sort of a legislative type function, and you have a quasi judicial function. And they're very different, and the difference matters. So for the legislative purposes, that applies when you're reviewing and making recommendations for new ordinances or the comp plan to the Board of Commissioners. You take public comment, but that's all part of a big legislative process that's dictated by state law. When you consider individual applications, so for example, an individual site plan or a subdivision plan, at that point, you are in the quasi-judicial realm. And that happens when you are taking decisions and applying facts, specific facts, to specific parcels of property. And that process requires that you allow public comment, public input, cross-examination. If someone so desires, you can impose reasonable limits, time limits on speakers so that you don't, you're not here until 2 a.m. And probably not giving the best decision that you could because you've been at it for so long.
Right.
And you can also certainly request that people, not reiterate things that have been said already. The witnesses do have to be sworn, and in your planning commission rules of procedure, you'll see this is sort of the short version of what has to happen and how the hearings progress. And then we have a little, paragraph 3.3 talks about the oath that's administered. And this is typically done by the chair or the vice chair if the chair is not available. And then you can make these recommendations. So the other thing that to be mindful of is that each of you is bound by the Code of Ethics, and the Code of Ethics has application to appointed officials, which is what you are. The beauty of the Planning Commission is that you're not political. You're appointed by a political body, but you are not political. You don't run for election. You serve your term and you do your jobs, hopefully. But it's also important to keep in mind when it's appropriate to engage in ex parte communications and when it isn't. And the Planning Commission rules of procedure actually do speak to that. Individual applicants are not supposed to meet with individual Planning Commission members. You also have an obligation to keep in mind the requirements of the Open Meetings Act. So if there's more than 2 of you, it's an open meeting. And we have to comply with these rules because it is in the public's best interest that all of these communications take place in public with the opportunity for public participation. On the rules of, or the Code of Conduct, there's a provision, it's 2.32G, and it's the use of prestige of office. There are certain things that are, obviously a conflict of interest, and, obviously, you're not going to come and vote on something for your employer. All right, that's in the no-brainer category. Things can get a little confusing though, when you drill down. And so you can't use the prestige of office for the gain of that official or employee or for the private gain of another. And you have to ensure that basically if it doesn't smell right, don't do it. Okay. It's an easy test. It's hard to explain, but once again, applicants should come, they should make their presentation. It is quasi judicial. There's actually a surprising dearth of case law on this in Maryland in any event, but we don't need to be the test case either. So having said all that, what I'd like to talk about now is briefly, Robert's Rules of Order, which are the bane of almost everyone's existence, and you don't have a resident parliamentarian. So what happens when something comes before you? Let's take a subdivision application, for example. The way this works is you have the staff make the presentation. There's questions of staff by the Planning Commission. The applicant makes the presentation. There are questions of the applicant by the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission takes public comment and tries to address any concerns that members of the public may have, but it's not mandatory. It's public comment. It's, you're the deciders. You don't necessarily get grilled, but frankly, sometimes everyone is better suited to the provision of information if you have it readily available. So then you have this discussion, and then the opportunity comes to make a motion. Well, when the Planning Commission is making a motion or taking a decision, you have to state the factual basis for your decision. Okay, so you're either going to approve, say you're going to approve the subdivision plan, say somebody's got a plan for 10 unit or 10 lot subdivision. So you have to go through the criteria that are in your code. And you can't just say criteria 1 through 5 are met. Okay, that doesn't work. If somebody were to challenge the decision of the planning commission, that's a no-go because you have to articulate the facts on which you're taking this decision. So an example of a conclusory statement is the criteria of APFO have been met. Why? Okay, so that it's the why. You know, why have the APFO criteria have been met? Well, let's just pull something out of the air. So for schools, all right, well, we know that Emmitsburg schools are, or at least not currently oversubscribed, and the 10 unit or the 10 lot housing subdivision isn't going to tip the scale. So we know that the population, the formula used by Frederick County Public Schools says we'll have X number of elementary, X number of middle, and X number of high school students in connection with this particular development based on these unit types. And using those and applying the formula, then we know that schools are not going to be overburdened and that won't pose a barrier to that particular subdivision plan. The same is true with trips. So do you need a traffic study? Well, how big is the subdivision? Are you going to have more than the minimum number of trips that would necessitate a traffic study? Those are specific findings that this planning commission can make. And so you can do this in a couple different ways. You can make the findings and then make a motion, or you can make a motion and then articulate the findings. These should all be reflected in the minutes. Okay, it's not just, you know, Commissioner Hagan moved to approve X, Y, and Z, seconded by Ms. Turnquist, 5-0. That's not it. It has to be what the motion is, state exactly the basis for the motion, and then articulate the factual findings in support of the motion, and your minutes should accurately reflect that. It's a lot.
Can we pause there for a moment?
Sure. Yeah, I know. I just keep talking. Feel free to interrupt me with questions.
So what you've just stated, does that apply to all applications that come before us, or is there a level like a subdivision application? Let's take Pradeep's situation tonight. He
That's
left.
a little tricky because
Yeah.
he's got an active application and I
Oh,
don't want to
that's-
get into
Yeah. right,
a
right,
pre-approval
sorry.
approval. So
But say Federal Stone or anything of that nature that's not a big development, do we have to state why we're making our decisions for every case?
you can adopt staff's recommendations. Staff here do a good job. They articulate what's going on. They set forth their proposed conditions, and staff is your best friend, right? Because they are the first stop in anybody coming to see you. So that application goes in, it gets reviewed by staff. They have to check off all the boxes, make sure all these things have been taken care of, make sure that it's gone to the engineers, make sure that the improvement plans are being assembled, make sure that to the extent that, you know, you need Frederick County to pass on sediment erosion and control, anything over 5,000 square feet. Yep, they've got to approve it. Same thing for, stormwater management. That's something that's subject to Frederick County review, and it's incumbent upon the applicant to make sure that those things have been taken care of. But staff will know if that's been done. And if it hasn't been done, then the most you can do is grant a conditional approval subject to the completion of those. So that was a really long and sideways answer to your question. There are different processes for different types of applications. So site plans, you already know that they've got the lot, they've got the zoning, and what we're going to look at in the site plan review process is what's narrowly defined in your ordinances. And so that's going to include, you know, the improvement plans, any public works agreement if it's necessary, you know, the bonding requirements. And I will tell you that your code says thou shalt not issue a zoning certificate without an improvement bond. I mean, it's in black and white. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
So that review process is less than, say, a major subdivision.
Okay.
Right, a major
That's the point I
subdivision.
was trying to get.
Yeah, no, a major subdivision it's a heck of a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then you have, I mean, you have to look at roads, you have to look at traffic, you have to look at how it is going to integrate into the surrounding neighborhood. Whether you're, are you going to need more signaling? Is there going to be an HOA to deal with any, public amenities or private amenities, as the case may be? So that's a much more robust
Right.
review process. So, and it's provided for in your code.
But just to reiterate, if I'm hearing you correctly, things like site plans for like most of what we deal with here,
Mhm.
preliminary site plans, if we reference the staff's conditions or the staff's comments, then you're kind of saying we're covered.
Depending upon what's in the comments, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, basically, if staff says, for example, the school's test is met because, it won't generate more than X elementary, middle, and high school students, then you can just adopt that as part of your findings. For a big project, frankly, you're going to have a lawyer up here
Yeah.
for the applicant and an engineer and a whole bunch of visual aids, and there'll be probably more information than you ever wanted.
Yeah.
So, but for the smaller ones, it's still incumbent upon the applicant to make sure that he or she has gotten all of their ducks in a row and is ready to make the presentation to you. Because obviously, you're not in the business of torturing people. It might seem that way, right? But you're really not.
No.
You're really not. I mean, and again, it's your obligation to look out for the best interests of the public in administering the zoning law. So a way to look at subdivision is that you're sort of filling in the gaps or the details in a zoning map. I think that might help you think about what it is that you're doing when you do a subdivision plan approval and review. And that's why we have a preliminary plan stage and a final plan stage. So, does anybody have any questions?
The thing you mentioned, Robert's Rules of Orders, are we bound by those now? It's
That's-
near and dear to my heart, and that's why
Yeah,
I'm
well,
scared if we're bound by them.
No, they're an aspirational goal.
Okay.
Let's call it that. Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I believe that there is a provision in your code that says you'll follow Robert's Rules of Order, but I've been doing this for a really long time. Nobody knows how to do this. It's just hard. And so an example is, so say you have a motion before you and somebody wants to add a condition. Well, guess what? After the motion's been made under Robert's rules, you're not supposed to do that. That motion is supposed to get killed, and then you have to make a new motion with the conditions. And I will tell you quite frankly, that it's a heck of a lot easier to have a consensus and just say, can we amend this motion? And then typically that's kind of what happens. Now I've probably just told everybody in the world how to contest something, but technically speaking, that motion is supposed to die. You vote it down and someone makes a new motion with the conditions. That's in accordance with Robert's Rules of Order. And if everybody can remember that, then hallelujah. So. Have I missed some things here, folks?
Well, one of the beauties of Robert's Rules is that it actually provides for someone to suggest something, and the period of consensus building starts right away because someone can second it, and then a discussion can happen. So that is the most important thing. And then a majority wins, not the strongest person or the loudest person. And sort of that's the skeleton of Robert's Rules of Orders. And if we get that right, we're 99% of the way there. So it's there may be times where we've communicated to an applicant that the staff feels that what they're proposing does not square with the zoning ordinance, but they intend to come to you anyway. So it comes to you in a kind of a contested way that we won't be able to recommend approval as proposed by the applicant. So when that happens, we'll have to be very careful and systematic about, from us, our standpoint, communicating what our reservations are about it and where it runs afoul of specific code. And if you see things our way, then you have to be very careful about deciding why it is that you're going to deny or send the proposal back to the applicant. And you can say, we can't approve this, come back and adjust these changes, or we'll approve it conditioned on compliance with the staff's comments. So, but when we get into that area of where a denial is a potential, we want to really be on our best game.
Right. Understood.
Yeah, that is critically important. You need to state your reasons. And so just as much as I harped on why you would approve something, it's doubly true for why you would deny something. So for example, we're denying this project because the APFO criteria have not been met. They have not been met for the following reasons. Boom, 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 boom. So, you explain yourselves.
Right.
Wait, by the way, you weren't here at the January meeting, but I thought the commissioners did a really good job in evaluating the amendments to the Forest Conservation Plan for the Rudders project and came to a good decision. But really, everyone had a chance to offer their comments and they made a good motion. And I thought you did a good job on that.
Thank you.
Because I know
Yeah.
it's sometimes hard to not give an applicant what they expect to have received.
Yeah.
And you did a good job.
Yeah, that was an interesting conundrum. And it was well handled. I wasn't here for the actual meeting, but you have a framework within which you have to operate. And I would strongly suggest that once you deviate from it for one person, it's a downhill slippery slope.
Yep.
It's consistency is pretty important.
Yeah.
And being mindful of of staff's time.
Right.
And so, you don't currently have an amendment process, in your code for administrative modifications. And, so when is it appropriate? You have to decide in making a recommendation, what are those parameters? But if staff has to go back and review a whole plan again, then is it really appropriate not to have a fee? You have to look at these things and is it, what's the impetus behind the issue? Is it because the applicant's changing the plan? Is it because there was a regulatory change that has been enacted before the approval of the plan that impacts the plan? These are all things that go into the calculus in determining, when it's okay.
So back to Robert's rules just for a moment.
Sure.
It's been a while since I've read through it. But if memory serves, when we make motions, like we have a motion and then a second, if I recall Robert's rules, there should be, the chair should ask, is there any more discussion? And I've rarely ever done that as chair. I guess when we get to that point, I usually kind of sensing where things are at. And we usually have a lot of discussion before the motion.
Right.
So I kind of think we're done, but if the other commissioners think I should be more diligent about asking for that, I could certainly try that.
That's, you do have a lot of discussion because frankly, you have to have discussion before you even know how to make the motion, right? But I think that, you can have the motion and you can call for any additional comments. That is strictly correct. You're absolutely right, Commissioner Long.
Okay. I'll try to remember.
We'll make a little note.
Just making more work for me, though.
Are you the secretary? There you go.
Well, I'm gonna, do you have any more presentation?
No, I'm finished.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna bring up something really shortly since our meeting isn't going too long. we are going to have a discussion at some point about the secretary's position. Just to plant that in your head. Because a little birdie told me that we don't necessarily have to have a secretary on our commission.
Oh, really?
And that there could be an option that staff would take the minutes, so we can be free to listen and discuss. But we're going to plant that thought. We're not going to deal with that this evening, but
You can put it on their list.
Yeah.
well, someone over there put it on my list. But we'll deal with that at another meeting to see what the will is of the commissioners.
Right. Well, it's always a pleasure. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you, Leslie.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Any other business for this evening? Any other comments from commissioners? Hearing none, we stand adjourned. 8:10.
Thank you.